welcome to Paperback Flicks. All right, well, welcome back, everybody. So tonight we're doing The Princess Bride. I'm here with
RJ Craddock.
Ray Davidson. In case sometimes I feel like we don't need to introduce ourselves anymore, and then I remember
Just in case we
not
will.
everybody knows us. So, anyway, so tonight we're doing The Princess Bride. This might show up backwards on the screen, and it also wants to disappear.
Yeah, it
But
looks fine on my side.
excellent. So for me, I saw the movie decades before I even knew that the book existed.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of want to start our journey that same way.
Okay, so do the movie first.
Yes.
Okay,
So
let's do it.
I want to know how young were you when you saw the movie?
The movie. I honestly cannot tell you a time in my life where I wasn't aware of this movie. Um, it might be a family thing or it might be just a Utah thing. It could be an LDS Mormon thing. All I know is that it's a big part of the culture of where I grew up. So, like, I don't remember not seeing this, not knowing this movie. So I honestly can't tell you.
Yep, I felt the same. I was trying to think of I early on when I was like, we're gonna do Princess Bride, I looked up when the movie was made and I don't remember now. But we were either like babies or not even born. Like 1987.
1987. Oh, so we were little babies.
We were littles
We
when this
were
was
young
made.
enough that we wouldn't have been too aware of it not happening before our
Right.
time or
And
after our
I
time.
I remember it was instantly quoted. Like I grew up with these quotes and I feel like I never didn't know the movie. So the whole basic story, the basic like the classic fantasy,
Hmm.
it was like I grew up with the quotes to the point that like I didn't even have like people didn't even have to reference it or whatever, and you would just say it, or someone would say something similar, and then you would go, "Anybody want a peanut?" or whatever, like.
Yeah,
But
and then it automatically starts a domino effect of quoting, and like everybody just keeps going. Yeah,
yes,
it's one of those. It's one of those movies. Anytime I quote it online, the comments just go on and on and on and on, and everybody
yes,
just keeps going.
yep.
So
And I
yeah,
feel
very
like
very popular with just about everybody I knew growing up. It's always a
mhm,
little weird when I meet somebody who doesn't know this movie. I wonder about their childhood a little
right,
bit, like sort of sad world they live in. Um, but yeah, I've always loved this movie. It's just endearing, it's quotable, it's entertaining. Anytime I watch it, it kind of feels like I'm discovering something new, even though it's the same thing. I
yeah,
know it so well.
yeah.
It's no, it's just I have a good time every single time.
Yeah, to me it's like when you like will smell something that you're like, it smells like Christmas or whatever, and like your olfactory like kicks in that
Like the memory.
the nostalgia or whatever. I feel like
Hmm.
every time I watch this movie, so when I was in high school and I think possibly even in junior high, and when I was like a young adult, like I had a lot of illness times, like times that I was just down, or like maybe not like ill, but like I would get off of work and I would be so drained and I physically couldn't move anymore. And I had a shelf of movies that were my sick day movies. And it was like maybe 10 movies that I would kind of rotate through. And Princess Bride was always one of them. It has like perfect pacing, it tells you the story, and it keeps taking you out of the story in an endearing way. The grandpa telling the story. Also, it has Fred Savage. And if you know me as a kid, like Fred Savage and Elijah Wood, they were it, man.
Yeah.
They were like if I don't know if it would have been annoying if the grandpa was not so endearing and it wasn't Fred Savage. Like
Hmm.
those two, I was perfectly fine with all the times that like the grandpa says like, you know, he doesn't die right here or whatever.
He doesn't get eaten at this time. The youth
Yeah.
don't get it. And it's like, yeah, I think they had a good chemistry. So they played off each other well and they had
Yeah.
a believable relationship,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And I loved that it, like I said, like it had that really good pacing, even with the intrusions, like as you get further into the story, they happen less and less, or
Mm-hmm.
they, you know, um, I never, there a lot of movies that I will love it, and yet I'm like, oh, but there's that part that I am always like, okay, get through this part, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like in this particular movie, I do not have that part. I love literally every scene of it. And sorry, I have ghosts
Somebody
walking
hovering
behind
over
me.
you.
But
Yeah, I agree. I don't feel like there's anything that's out of place or anything that's not right. Every actor feels right. Every set feels right. Um, I just feel like it's one of I don't know if it's because of the nostalgia, because I grew up with it, or because it really is that good as a
mhm,
movie, but everything seems to come together.
yeah.
I even feel like even now watching the fire swamp scenes, I still kind of feel like the RUOU
ROUSs, yeah.
RUOS. I can never say it right. Um, the rats of unusual size
Mhm.
still look good to me,
Yeah,
even like now.
yeah.
They're
I
still
so
believable.
I think one thing that they got kind of on their side, just with the nature of what the story is that it's supposed to be fantasy. It's supposed to be what the little what Fred Savage's character is seeing in his mind.
Hmm.
So Princess, I honestly, I was always bored by Princess Buttercup, but she was the perfect princess. Like she was
Hmm.
beautiful, but she wasn't like 10 pounds of makeup beautiful, you
Yeah.
know? She
Hmm.
wasn't like Hollywood perfect. She was what you would expect a girl living on a farm or whatever
Yeah.
who is insanely beautiful to look like. You know what I mean? And
Hmm.
she doesn't, I always kind of felt like the one not a 10 as far as character, like I felt like Giant, what was his name? Fezzik,
Hmm.
10. Inigo Montoya, of course, 12 and a half. You know, you love Wesley. You even like the villains. You like the Count. You like Humperdinck. Like
Hmm.
he just is like that, like, ugh, like, you know.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I'm like, I don't care about Buttercup, but no, I can't think of anyone else that would have worked better.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
I
so,
think she fits it well. I feel like she has a good chemistry with Wesley. I
mhm,
buy that there's a love and affection and that they care about each other. So I buy
yeah,
that. They also look great together, so that always helps as well.
yes,
What's funny is this is Robin Wright pen, whatever she calls herself now, Robin
mhm,
Wright's first movie.
yeah. Wasn't
So
she doing soap operas before or something like
yeah,
that?
like I guess I don't know. But they
TV or
say
something.
introducing Robin
Mhm,
Wright, and it's like, really? But yeah,
yeah.
she I think she did a pretty good job considering it's her first like film.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I
yeah.
like as much as I was like, it's hard when you have a lot of 100%, the 90% is like, oh man, 90, but also 90%. Like, you know what I mean? Like an A
Yeah.
is an A, whether
Yeah.
it's the
I wouldn't say she's ever really bothered me, but like I feel like she does the melodrama
Mhm,
well. She's believable enough,
mhm.
and yeah, I think
Yeah.
she's pretty enough. She's one thing I have to say, when we were watching the movie this time, a couple of my kids were kind of coming in and out. And you know the part where Prince Humperdinck is introducing his bride to the people, and he's
Mhm.
all, and she wants a commoner like yourself. Maybe you won't think of her common now. I present to you Princess Buttercup. And like my son goes, it sounds like he's marrying a horse. And I'm like, you're right. I forget because I'm used to that being her name, how non-human sounding that name is. It's just
Well,
not a
yeah.
common name.
And the reason for that is when we talk about the book, but it does there are, so like I said, when I saw the movie for decade, like I was a mother of several children before I ever knew that it was a book. And somebody, I think it was probably my mom, was like, I know that you've always loved this movie. I'm surprised you didn't name one of your kids Buttercup. Gave me the book for whatever. I don't remember who it was, but they were like, this book is yours because I know you'll love it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when they said, I'm surprised you didn't name any of your kids Buttercup, I was like, no. But if I had a boy, I might have named him Wesley.
Wesley is a good name. I do like that. I
But
do like the idea of indigo for a boy too. That's nice. Yeah.
yeah. But yeah.
But Buttercup, it's hard to not. I think of Powerpuff Girls is the other thing that I think of. So it's like it's hard for me to associate it as a regular person name.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it does kind of fit with the concept of this is like pure fantasy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you can look at the costumes and be like, well, that would have been a whatever Italian.
Well, it's also based off
1400s.
of an imaginary country
Right.
that doesn't exist.
Which I did a little bit of research,
Mm-hmm.
and not as much as I might normally do, but I did do a little research into what Florin, like what that, and it appears that Goldman, William Goldman, was heavily influenced by kind of the general European, like early European stuff, but also specifically the Italian Florence. I don't know. There's like a specific like you know how they'll be like there's Paris fashion or there's Kiev fashion or whatever. Like the Florence stuff was kind of influencing him. And so when he's describing like the pastoral lands or whatever, that
Like
a
the
lot of the
beautiful background
time,
behind you.
yes, like what's a lot of times it's he's seems to be trying to describe something that is rather Italian or maybe Florence type,
Okay.
which I think what's behind me is Tuscany, but you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's Italian, so close enough.
Right. But
Yeah,
how
I agree. I definitely get the sense of an Italy kind of vibe from it, but it also kind of gives us a kind of a everywhere Europe in
right,
medieval Europe like
right.
vibe, and I feel like
And
that's
that's
the
what it's
best
supposed to
people can
be.
do most of the time when they're doing fantasy is
Yeah,
just kind of a smudge all the cultures together,
right.
you know.
It is once upon a time in a
We're not,
faraway land.
yeah,
Like you don't get time and place. You just need to understand once upon a time, a long time ago.
it doesn't really
So,
matter. Yeah.
yeah.
So what I think was funny is that, like I talked about last time when you announced what we were going to do,
Mhm.
I actually believed the longest time that this was a book by a different guy that
Oh,
he went and abridged.
yes.
And like I totally bought into that whole thing. And I'm researching it and I'm like, no, no, no. It turns
Nope.
out this is a
Yeah.
ruse. He kept going through like the rest of his life. He kept like
Right.
pretending like he was getting sued from the Florin diplomats or something like for writing stuff about their
Right.
monarchs or something and like all this crazy stuff. And I'm like, okay, so you're really committed to this. Um, but yeah, I bought that lie.
So I could talk about the movie forever and I'm all like puffy rainbow clouds. It's amazing. But I do kind of want to switch over to the book, even if we bounce back and forth.
You might
Um,
as well. Okay.
because so now that you brought it up, let me get this thing out of the way. Um, so yes, it's William Goldman. He did actually write it. And I have so yeah, just like you were saying, it says like it's the abridged S. Morgenstern, right?
Yeah.
And or Morgenstein or something. And I believe that too. And I now that I have read it all the way through, because I started reading it once
Mm-hmm.
and I hated it. I hated it.
Oh, okay.
And I did not even get through all of Inigo's story, like his backstory.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere in there, in the 100 some odd page, I think it's like 80 pages or something, the longest chapter in the history of the world. It's more than a third of the book is this one chapter, and
Oh
they
wow.
go through everybody's backstories and stuff. Well, not everybody's, but several of the backstories. I couldn't even get through Inigo's backstory, and I'm like, screw it, whatever. I'm done. I'm
Huh.
I don't care anymore. And then when I read it again for this, like that's why I don't know. When I said it the first time, when I said I announced like we're gonna do The Princess Bride, I was like, apparently I'm just a glutton for punishment because we're gonna read this because I couldn't get through it. And I hate that because of how much I love the movie. So now that I have actually read it, what I hate is that he pulls you out in in a way that I don't appreciate. Like I
Okay.
love the grandpa and the kid in the movie. I felt like it was done just enough that you remember it's grandpa telling a story, and it was comical and it had good timing and whatever. I don't like it in here, and having read all the way through it, I feel like he had a great idea. Here's a classic fantasy good idea, and he didn't feel confident enough to just write it. And so he's like, oh, it's this guy's, and let me put a bunch of little comments in here, and it's satire, and it feels like it's, I know I was like at church or something and I was saying like, oh, my friend who's whatever, my friend said, or my mom always said, and there was this one lady who she's like, you always have such wonderful things to say, but none of them ever come from you, you know,
Oh,
because
what?
I do tend to do that. I'll be like, this thing that another person said influenced me greatly. And she's like, sure, but tell me about the influence, not just about what they said. Like that was kind of where she was going,
Okay.
which is fine. That's fine. But I feel like that's what he does in this book is that he's always like, oh, well, see, here he goes through 42 pages of talking about her wardrobe. So, that's no fun. Okay, or just write the story you want to write, dude. Like,
Yeah.
people would have
I
loved
think
it if you
it is
just,
a kind of a fun creative way to go about it.
it
Um,
could be.
but yeah, it does kind of like take the weight off of you. It's not your story. You're just
Right.
sort of abridging it. So it's an interesting choice for sure.
So
Um,
I did like the pretend S. Morgenstern, like when he was like, this was before Europe. Oh, but this was after Paris. Oh, but this is, and like that silly kind of thing to kind
yeah.
of poke fun at the, just to be like, guys, this is a pretend story,
Mhm.
like that kind of satire. I liked that. I
Yeah.
was okay with that. But just the whole like pulling you out to tell you about, oh, what was his name? Robert Browning's book of poetry that didn't ever sell a single copy or whatever. I don't care about that. It's
I
somewhere
forgot all
somewhere in
about it.
there.
I must have just like,
Yeah, well, so after a while, I just start, anytime it's italicized, I just start skipping it. I just skip his whole thing. I just don't care. But yeah, it goes on for like sometimes he'll go on for several pages of like, this is just me talking, and I don't like it. But a lot of what he does, well, like this, everything that happens with the kid and the grandpa, that is all from his personal inserts.
okay.
So I do appreciate that they existed so that we could have that grandpa kid story,
Hmm.
but
It
reading it was tedious.
it definitely works better in a film setting,
Mm-hmm.
having that dynamic. It's not nearly as interesting in a book.
Mm-hmm.
I found it interesting as I was reading it, the differences and um, how much more effective everything was, all the lines, all the characters were in the movie to
Yes.
the audiobook,
Yes.
you know?
Including they used almost every line in the movie is in the book, but
Mhm,
it's either sometimes said by a different person or said in a different place. And I
mhm.
feel like every choice that they made was the right choice
Yeah. There's
every
like a
time.
few lines here and there that weren't in the book that
Mm-hmm.
like improved what was.
Yes.
So it's one of those situations where the movie is definitely better than the book.
Yes.
Not that there are a huge ton of differences.
Right.
I do want to talk about the decision to change it from the Zoo of Death to the Pit of Despair.
Yes.
Like, I'm wondering if a good portion of that is budget, and having to get all these animals, because this is before CGI, or
True.
like intense CGI anyways.
Yeah.
And
Before
like
we recognize the
it
CGI.
would have been animated, but it wouldn't have been like really nice, and or get real animals, and then you have to go through all the things that Fezzik and Indigo do to get down to where Wesley is. And although there were things that were interesting about it that I enjoyed, like I love the part with the python where
Mhm.
they're getting like attacked and wrapped up by the snake. And like Fezzik's like, I can't get out, I can't get out. And like Indigo's like, oh, but Fezzik, I had such rhymes for you. He's like, what rhymes? What rhymes? And so that gets him so angry that he actually manages to get himself out
Right.
and get the snake off of him and kill the snake. Then he's like, okay, what rhymes? He's like, I can't die without knowing the rhymes. And then he's like, oh no, I just wanted to, motivate you to get us out.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, you lied to me. Like, I I liked in ways the Fezzik in the book, but I prefer the Fezzik of the movie. Like
Yeah.
Fezzik of the book was a little more simple minded and a little more like childlike,
Yeah.
whereas movie Fezzik, he's not the smartest person in the world, but he doesn't come off as a child per se.
Right.
Maybe,
Well, and
yeah.
yeah, no, I agree. And I feel like, so that's what I was, when I was talking about Buttercup earlier, um, having read the book. So the reason behind her name is because like you'll have Rose, or you'll have, Violet or whatever. And parents often will name their kids after flowers particularly, or and so he was like, oh, it's a flower, but it's also like kind of the ugliest flower name, like, and it's just so common that it's not even like Rose, it's Buttercup,
Hmm.
like to kind of poke fun at that whole dynamic. And
Yeah.
so once I understood that, then I was like, oh, okay, that's funny. Like,
Yeah.
but also the Buttercup in the book, I don't like at all. Like, like
Yeah.
after seeing after reading it, I actually appreciate movie Buttercup more.
Yeah. It was kind of fun seeing her, like, of who she was before she suddenly fell in love with Wesley because somebody else noticed him. And suddenly she's
Right.
like, how dare anyone else notice him? I must be in love with him. And then um I liked some of the things he talked about as far as like she was beautiful. She had potential for beauty, but like
Right.
her suffering through Wesley's death like made her
Made
beautiful
her.
because it
Yeah.
made her more
Yep.
calm, and it like helped sort of bring that out or
it
whatever. And
yeah, it matured her in a
yeah.
way that was like it physically resonated, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yes, I do like that, like the Buttercup at the end of the book is obviously not the same selfish, obnoxious Buttercup at the beginning of the book. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I see the growth, I see the character growth, I always appreciate character growth.
Yeah.
But like, he just I don't know, maybe he just didn't know how to write a good woman character,
Maybe he just didn't feel
because
like
she's
she
the only
needed to
one.
be really
Like, every
detailed or
every
complicated.
every wife was a nag and not really very important, and Buttercup was kind of always there, and she was like the axis around which everything else is
Yeah.
rotating, and yet she's like the blandest character. And I don't know. So anyway, after reading it, I'm like, oh yeah, so that's what they had to work with Buttercup. They did an excellent job,
Yeah. Yeah. There wasn't a lot to work with in the first place.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So what was I gonna say? I have no idea what I was gonna say.
Mm.
Um,
So also, I love me a good backstory. I didn't Maybe this is just my movie bias talking, but I didn't care and I didn't need any of the backstories. And I understand that because the book came first, when you are writing a fantasy, you often give your characters backstories. I get it.
yeah.
I hear you.
And that's the beauty of a book. You get more details, you get more in depth.
Right. I really like I said, they made all the right choices, I feel like, in the movie, where they were like, let's pull out just enough of this guy's backstory that we, meet at the beginning. I didn't need to know all of the rigmarole about Vicini, how he lured them into working with him, and how, whatever, Inigo's soliloquy on the cliffs of failure or whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
meet at the beginning, and or go back to the beginning or whatever. I didn't need that. I had a drunk Spaniard saying, Vicini said, come to the beginning. This is the beginning. Okay, cool. I'm with you. I'm on
That's
board.
good. Yeah, and like it works to have Indigo just tell Wesley the story, and it feels natural.
Yeah.
Just be like, oh, okay. So he's got to explain why he asked if he's got 6 fingers on his right hand. It's like you always start a conversation that way. That's one of the lines in the movie that's not in the book, and
Right.
I love that. And it's like, yeah, that's a very natural way to have that
Right.
conversation that tells
Yeah.
that story.
There
It
are a
works.
few there are a few lines in the movie, like how in the book they talk about how Fezzik loves rhymes, and that's kind of his coping mechanism. And as a kid he would always rhyme, and he wasn't a smart kid, but he could always find a rhyme, or make up
Hmm.
words that could rhyme if he couldn't find a real word or whatever. And that's great, fine. But I love, like, the whole rhyming thing. The stop that rhyming now, I mean it. Anybody want a peanut? Like
Yeah.
that was one of the most iconic. You have you have not ever seen that movie or known anyone who has seen that movie if you don't know that rhyme. You know what I mean? And so, like I kept waiting for that, and I realized, like, once they were at the cliffs, I'm like, oh, maybe it's just in another part of the book. And they thought it was so funny they put it in. No. You know.
Yeah.
Also, the at the very end of the movie, when he says this, there's been 4 great kisses and this kiss outdid them all. That's in, like, the first half of the first chapter or something. That's super early on in the book. And it doesn't really have a very effective, like, this is amazing, life changing, the way to it is the perfect way to end this
Yeah.
story. It was all
Especially when he's like afraid of it being a kissing book. Um,
right.
and like his grandpa said, someday you may not mind. And by the end of the book, he doesn't mind anymore because he cares about
Yeah.
these characters. So he's like, yeah, I'm okay with watching them kiss. I kind of wanted to go back to the whole pit of despair thing
Mhm.
and how much more effective I feel like that idea is to the whole over elaborate zoo of death.
Right.
Um, just the name of it's better. The pit of despair. Don't even think. Trying to think about escaping. That the albino was funny. Taking all the other extra stuff out and just having the machine it was such a wise choice.
Mhm.
It's just so much better. Like it
Yeah.
focused what was most important.
Admittedly funner to read. The Zoo of Death is probably the thing in the book that was funner to read than than it would have been if you were just reading the Pit of Despair stuff.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, like for a book, it makes more sense that they have to go through more trials to find
Mhm.
Wesley and it's this more elaborate thing. It paints a very different picture of Prince Humperdinck as this
Mhm.
like big old mammoth guy, and like he has to challenge himself to be able to like fight baboons, and like lions and all these things. And there's a whole reason he has the zoo of death, so he has all these things to challenge himself. So like in
Mhm.
the book, he's like this great big hulky strong man, and in the movie he's just a hunter,
Right.
which I think works fine.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, so too with the Count. The Count is also like this guy with a big booming voice, and in the movie he actually has a very soft spoken voice, and I actually love it. I associate the Count's voice with evil.
Yeah,
Like, yeah,
like very, it's almost more sinister that way. And
yeah. And I like it. I
yeah,
like,
my favorite quote from Alexander Skarsgård is that I'm going to kill you is so much more effective in a whisper than it is in a yell. And
yeah.
that's what you get from the Count Ruben. he just comes off so menacing. And what's funny is Christopher Guest is the actor that plays him, and he doesn't do a character like this in anything else. Everything else he does, they're generally his own movies, and they're these silly characters, and they're quirky and they're weird. I swear this is the only time he really plays a villain or a dark character, and he's so good at it. You're like, he should do this more. He was very believable. He had like a presence about him, like he was menacing without having to really say or do anything.
Right. Which I loved.
Yeah.
Cary Elwes, Andre the Giant,
Mandy Patinkin,
however you say his name. But yeah, like this was the first thing that I had ever seen of them. This is this is how I knew most of these actors in this. Even what's his name? Miracle Max.
Oh, like, yeah. The Miracle Max. Yeah. So
right.
Like, I love the addition of the wife, by the way.
Yes.
That so improved that whole scene, having her there. So much more interesting.
And again, that's one of those iconic quotes that everyone knows. I'm not a witch, I'm your wife. You know,
I have that on a shirt. I wear it Halloween. So yeah, it's
and
it just made for more character. And then again, Billy Crystal was perfect for Miracle Max.
I forget his name. Oh,
he was hilarious and just he was funny. I forget the name of the actress. I want to say Bernadette Peters.
No, it's not.
No, not Bernadette Peters. It's another actress that I always mistake her and Bernadette because they have a similarity about them.
Yeah.
Like there's actors like that. You're like, I know it's not the same person. They remind me so much of each other.
I did that early on in this series, back in the Harry Potter, the first episode. I did that with
Maggie Smith,
and I don't even remember. Olivia. I don't even remember. I'm sorry.
I don't remember who it was, but yeah, the one's like, oh wait, that's not her.
But I totally confused them.
it happens. It happens all the time. That's all the things they added in the movie. They just made it a more interesting scene.
Yeah.
And I feel like they got the right actors for just about everybody.
Yes.
Like, and even Buttercup, I still feel like, she's not the wrong actor for it.
Right. Like, yeah, she
didn't do a bad job. So
I didn't like the character as much as I liked all the other characters. Like I said, all the other characters were so fun, and all of the actors were perfect for where they were. That even though she was also excellent, she just wasn't that like perfect that everybody else was,
Yeah.
Nothing against.
And I think part of that is, being a newer actor and newer to film at least. Yeah. And working with some of these people are very seasoned and been around for a while. And just, naturally really great actors.
And like I said, having kind of all of these other characters with or without backstories are all more developed characters. Yeah. And they're all kind of caricatures almost.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
In a way, so is Buttercup, though. She's the classic damsel in distress, or like the maiden that everybody like fawns over.
Right.
And what's funny, though, is this in real life, the girl that gets all the guys' attentions, most of the time, they really aren't that interesting. A lot of times they are very simple. Then they think they're mysterious. Oh, she's mysterious and whatever. And really, she's not. She's just a very simple person. And I've seen that a lot in real life and in books. And it's true. So maybe she's supposed to be that way. Maybe she's supposed to be just like the beautiful, simple, everyday, nothing special, but she's gorgeous. So that's why she's in the situation to begin with.
I was kind of hoping that I don't feel like I needed it from the movie anymore, but in the book I was waiting for that moment that Wesley's like, I always saw your potential, I always knew that you had conviction, whatever. But he always goes back to her beauty. And even she, at one point, she's like, say something other than talking about my beauty, And he's like, I love when you realized you loved me because you were so beautiful, And so I did kind of wonder. I kind of did wonder if Goldman was like, I don't know, beautiful woman. Does your book, or did the audiobook go through his story, Goldman's prelude that was about him.
Yeah, a little bit about how like his dad had read it to him, and then when he grew up, he bought it for his son, and then he was
Yeah,
quizzing his son about everything, and he's like, "Wait, he didn't read it,"
he didn't read it. Yeah,
and
yeah, and
then he went and
so
picked it up and read it again, and was like, "Wait,
yeah,
yeah,
when he's talking about how he was like he's there in California and there's this beautiful whatever bombshell kind of new actress and she's like, oh yeah, and she's being flirtatious and kind of doing the reverse casting couch, like, I will sleep with you, put me in your movie, you know. And he just keeps and he makes her super two-dimensional too, and she kind of is doing that, assuming that this was a real experience, but like she's just a bimbo, whoever this woman is or is supposed to be, and he's like, she's gorgeous, gorgeous, god, like everything about all of his interactions with women is they're either naggy wives or they're like
bombshells."
beautiful meat suits, like
Yeah,
like
yeah,
he
and it's possible. I don't think that was in my version, so maybe I had an abridged version of the abridged F. Morgenstern, or like it didn't make an impact. I don't know. I don't think that was in my version. So
I guarantee you're not missing anything. I think if I had, like, my sister said, "Oh, I liked the book," but she's the one that she's like, "I just skipped everything that was about him. I don't care about the author. I wanted to read the story." And I was like, "Oh, I should have done that." And I started skipping all the italics. And you
mhm.
know what? I liked it. And then when it ends, it's like, and it's done. And he's like, "Now I think they should have had a happily ever after." But this is how Morgenstern left it. So right off into the sunset, and I'm like, well, but now I know. Now I know that it's you. You could have given them that fairy tale ending. You
Mhm.
chose to not. Just take the credit.
Yeah, yeah. I did enjoy the little extra that he added about like, "Oh, this is how Morgenstern ended it, but this is what I think it should have been." I
Mm-hmm.
like that in the book. I thought it was kind of interesting to think about that. But I know like kind of him going for a little touch of realism,
Mm-hmm.
but it does work so much better in the movie just to be like, and they got away and they had this big epic kiss and their love and
Yep. And like I said, because this is the epitomal fantasy story, random kingdom of generic romanticized European
Europeanness. Yes.
origin, yeah,
Yeah.
and the impossibly beautiful and yet girl next door girl,
Yeah.
and evil is just absolutely evil, and good is just impossibly, but there he is, good, and whatever. Of course they get their happily ever after because it is what it is. You're not
It
even
is.
being
It
true
is.
to the
That's the story
story anymore.
that you're telling. That's the story that we're
Yeah,
reading.
yeah.
Um, I do think it's funny that they never quite explain why they fell in love with each other or why he liked her even though she was a punk to him. I do like that they took out her
Me
parents.
too.
They worked fine for a little bit they were in the book, but yeah, like them not being there, you don't miss them. You don't miss,
Yeah.
yeah, like there's part of me that goes, where's her parents? Because a young woman like that wouldn't be living by herself.
With a
But
boy, with a farm boy.
exactly, with a man that isn't her father or isn't
Right.
family. And so there's things like that where it's like that's not realistic. I also okay, this is one of my issues I've always had with the story is it's not realistic for the princess to go off riding by herself.
Mm-hmm.
Buttercup, the country girl, sure. The princess who just been announced she's engaged to the prince, no. So that part of the story never made any sense to me. That
Yeah.
she didn't have an escort.
I
Unless
feel like
she's like sneaking out
in the
and
book,
nobody knows she's doing it.
doesn't she basically do that? I thought there was something to the effect that she's like, I'm out, and then I don't I don't remember. I thought there was
I
something
don't remember there being anything about an escort or her like ditching her escort or like sneaking
um,
out. Just that, she went riding.
yeah. I felt, because I felt like that too. In the movie, I was like, queens or princesses to be or whatever, they don't get to use the toilet without six people attending them. Like,
Yeah, yeah. Like
what in
it's a
the
big
world?
deal. And if she's that big a deal, he should be protecting her better. But
But
then when you know that
also,
he's part of the whole plot, it's,
right.
it's like, oh
That
yeah, she
was,
can go ride by herself. She's fine. But
yep.
like I guess we don't need that. But at the same time, that part of me is like, logically, that doesn't make sense.
See, and that, so you're right. In the movie, I did think that until you learn that the prince is essentially he not essentially, he is literally the
He
one
hired
that
them.
sent them out to get her. And
Mm-hmm.
then I'm like, oh, of course he sets her up in the same way that he did the letter thing. Oh, write a letter, we'll make copies, we'll send it on our fastest ships.
Yeah.
Like he knew what he was doing, and he was
Mm-hmm.
like, she was off by herself. Oh, like
Oh no.
it was
Yeah.
all on purpose. And so that made it okay for me. And even thinking about Buttercup's position, like I was like, she came from commonness. Like if she was a princess raised in normal, like
Nobility.
nobility, yes, then
Yes.
she would have been like, um, where are you?
Where are my paves?
But she wasn't. She was Buttercup, raised on a milk farm. She just needed to get out and go ride her horse,
And go
which
by herself.
the backstory does explain. Like she did it to the point of obsession, in the same way that Humperdinck was obsessed with hunting and killing and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
She was obsessed with her horse.
One of the
So,
things they did in the book that I liked is that when Humperdinck meets her, you get to see the whole Humperdinck meeting her,
mhm,
and like he's all marry me, and she's like, no, it's like I'll never love again. And then he's like, oh, I don't want you to love me, and like
mhm,
I don't want love. I just need a princess,
right,
and we'll have a kid or something. And she's like, oh well, you don't expect me to love you, then okay. And like I kind of like that because then it made more sense how she ended up being engaged to Humperdinck in the first place.
right.
Because like
Yeah, that was the one.
it works in the book, but then in the movie they just say, because he's the prince, he has the right to choose a bride. She
Mhm,
can't refuse him because she's a subject. She has to marry him.
yeah,
Um, but that made more sense to me that she was like, this is just an arrangement, you
yeah.
know, whatever. I guess slightly better living conditions. And I don't have to worry about falling in love again because I'm already married to somebody I don't love and he doesn't love me. And it's just a business transaction or something.
Yeah.
And that kind of
Well,
made
and
sense.
Wesley's dead. Like that was kind of her whole thing. Like she goes back to that over and over again with Wesley once he reappears and she knows it's him again. And
Hmm.
she's like, "You were dead." Like I kind of figured, "Hey, here's a safety," which she doesn't know how unsafe it is, but
Unsafe. Yeah.
she's like, "Here's a safe situation, someone that knows I'm not going to love him." And he's like, "Whatever. I don't even he's not even asking me to love him." So
Yeah.
cool. Like
Like, what's to lose here? Yeah.
I
So,
have to keep living. So, and you're not living with me. So,
yeah.
solution found.
I did always love that line though. He's like, why didn't you wait for me? Well, you were dead. Like, pretty obvious. She's like really confused. How are you asking me this? He's all,
Right.
oh, death can't stop true love and only delay it a while. And I always loved that kind of like cavalier, like sort of debonair, but like his whole attitude about it was like, oh, no big deal. We'll see each other in heaven or something. Like,
Right.
you're not supposed to go get married, even if I'm dead. Like, I don't
You're
know.
20, I'm dead. Live the next 60 years without me. Like,
Yeah. I don't know.
okay.
Like, it works in the movie and you buy it because I do feel like there's a certain chemistry between the actors
Mm-hmm.
that you buy that there's this that they really care about each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they don't show it. They don't like develop it at all. And in some ways, like it develops more because he had to save her and because she thought he was this bad guy. And then turns out he's her true love and to save each other or whatever. That does kind of help solidify that sense of this is, this is meant to be, this is real,
Right.
but they don't actually do any of the work. And most of the time that would bother me. But
Yeah.
maybe because of the nostalgia, or maybe just because, everything else is done so well, it doesn't
Right.
matter. You just you just buy it.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
I would
and like,
fall in love with Wesley. I think Cary
and we all
Elwes
did.
is
If you were,
beautiful, and I think he's
if
still
you were
handsome.
born, if you were born between 1970 and 1999, I promise you had a crush on Wesley, even if you didn't have a crush on Cary Elwes. I know that it happened. Oh,
Yeah,
and you
because
have crushes
Wesley as a
on.
character is fun and interesting, and I guess crazy to think of all the things he mastered in 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Like Indigo was studying the sword like his whole life. He'd been doing it for 5 years, and like he's better than him. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
so apparently Wesley has like my husband's gift of learning to do things really well. Like
Yeah.
he's gifted at learning stuff or something because he
Yeah.
just learned to
Well,
be a pirate and all this other cool stuff.
and like I go back to, it is kind of the epitomal um fantasy story. And
Hmm.
so of course, true love is able to make him capable of his superpower is, I love her so much, I will literally spin the world in the opposite direction if that's what it takes. Like,
Hmm.
and kind of the all of the like the little things here and there, oh well, they wouldn't have this perfect understood romance, but they would in a perfect fantasy, a purely fantasy story, right?
Yeah.
Like, and
Hmm.
so I think that's why it just works, is
It works. Yeah.
because you are pulled into the story. And in the same way, I've talked about how, like, I don't like it when magic is kind of the
Magic.
deus ex machina,
It's
right?
just
Like,
like the band-aid put on it. They don't explain
yeah,
how, just magic fixed it.
right. But in this story, that almost needs to happen. Like, that you almost need to just be like, because of course he resurrects him, because this is the story, Of
Hmm.
course Wesley can do that, because this
Of
is the
course.
story.
Yeah. A couple things I thought was interesting as I was researching is like William Goldman wrote so much stuff, so many books, so many screenplays. He
Mhm.
won 2 Oscars. One was for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, which
Uh-huh.
is one of my favorite movies. So I was like, oh yeah. And then for All the King's Men, the other one
Was he all the
was
Kingsman? He might have
was
been.
the adaptation.
Yeah, I would say he
So
has
he
the
won like the best original for Butch Cassidy and then adaptation for All the King's Men.
right.
And
I think you're right.
but what I found interesting is that he's been quoted to say that this is his favorite thing he ever wrote.
Yeah.
Princess Bride is his favorite thing.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. I'm not generally a Rob Reiner fan, like the director.
Mhm.
Like I think he's fine, but this is one of those times where I feel like his, you know, he doesn't have like really, he's not fancy. He doesn't do like have like a big flair, but like he has kind of a wholesomeness, or kind of like
Mhm.
he just good enough,
Yeah.
like he does an adequate job. He's good, but he's not like, oh, award-winning, amazing director. But I feel like this is one of those situations where his style works just right for
Right.
this movie.
Well, and I was watching a, I don't know, making of type of thing,
Uh-huh.
and I think it was him, one of the producers, or possibly him or whatever, but they said that, like, their daughter was reading the book, was like, I love the book, and he's like, I just had to do this. I had to do this movie. And they're talking to Billy Crystal and others that are just like they make the world. They make this world of the Princess Bride out of just pure love of what it is. Like, I
Mhm.
actually had in my notes that I didn't like the dialogue, because the Buttercup Wesley dialogue and the parents, whatever, in that first little bit is kind of garbage. Like you can't, because I would see the characters from the movie doing these things, and I'm
Mhm.
like, she sounds like a nitwit. Like, I can't even imagine. how you could make, there's other lines in here that when you read them, you're like, well, that's kind of awkward. And then I remember how they said it in the movie, and I'm like, they made that sucker work. Like, that was an iconic line once they said it that way, you
Yeah,
know?
when it said right.
Right. And as I was reading the Buttercup dialogue, especially, but Buttercup and Wesley, I was like, this doesn't, it feels like it doesn't work. Like, I can't imagine how even those actors and even that director would have gotten the feeling of the movie into those scenes.
Yeah,
I'm very glad that they didn't put those scenes in,
yeah.
because we didn't need them, and because I felt like they almost detracted. Like I said, most of this script, almost the entire script, is in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's in the exact point that it's in the movie or not,
Yeah.
almost all of it is directly from the book. There are some extremely clever either one-liners or back and forth, or it's said as a narration, but someone says it verbally in the movie,
Mm-hmm.
and it's excellent. Even some of his pullouts, when he's pulling you out and he's talking about having pneumonia and his dad is reading it, or the like the point where the grandpa stops and he's like, oh, all right, you're getting a little
Are you
too
okay?
into this.
We can stop if you want.
Yeah. And but then in the movie, he's like, whoa, do we need to stop? You're good? I'm good. Please go on. And they go on. In the book, he's like, yep, you're getting too into this. I'm done. And then dad goes away. And then he has the whole night that he's fretting over it and whatever. And I'm like, dude, I don't need your story. A quick little cut in, fine. I didn't need a page and a half of you telling me about being up all night when it wasn't likely even real. Like,
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
much of his backstory on himself was even real?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe none of it. I don't even know. Like, it was just one of those things that I was just like,
Hmm.
I can appreciate the book now more than I did the first time I read it. There was something else that I was like, it was so different from the movie. And then I saw
Oh,
the movie and it wasn't actually as actually different. Like,
yeah.
I
So
don't
the
know.
whole thing where like the king dies and before the next dawn they're married and her whole dream thing,
Uh-huh.
that's not in the book. And
I
I'm like,
love her
that's
dreams.
one of
Her
my favorite parts. I love the whole "Pew, pew, rubbish buck," and like there's something just so funny about, at the same time menacing about that lady.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
imagine having a dream like
so
that. Like I could.
that one is in the dream. That dream is in the movie. The
It's not.
the
It's not in the book, or it wasn't in my
it is
version of
it
the
is
book.
in the book. It's her first, that's her first nightmare.
Okay.
Is the old lady that's like the queen of muck, the queen of filth.
I
Like,
think we read completely different versions. I think the one I had does not have it. I noticed. I was like, it's not there.
in what I was reading, that was her first nightmare. And then her next nightmare, she has a daughter, a newborn baby, that is talking to her about your milk is sour because it doesn't have love in it, and it like crumbles to dust in her arms. And then she has another nightmare about a son who's like a newborn son, and she's like, wait, give me my baby. And then he like stands on the other side of the room, even though he's a newborn. And he also like is talking to her about how like, no, you're a liar and you have no soul or whatever. I don't know.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
so I love those nightmares, although that was a very different, that would be a very different movie from the
Yes.
movie that we.
Yes. I think the old lady is enough. Oh, so one of the things that we always do when we watch this, Johnny, when they're in the fire swamp apparently was the first day of shooting.
Oh.
And when Buttercup falls into like the quicksand, whatever,
Mhm.
Johnny loves to, my husband, he loves to try to hold his breath the whole time she's in there. So he's like, he goes, how is this possible? And then like he holds his breath and he can't do it for as long as she's in there. But like it's like, well, we'll just do it for like when Wesley goes in. And so then he's like, I can do it for how long Wesley's in. But it's like, so I guess part of me always kind of wanted him to resuscitate her when he got her out, because how's she
Yeah.
alive?
Yeah. Well, and in the book, in the book they do talk about, so first of all, when you're reading it, like you're like 8 minutes have gone by, you're all dead, you know.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But even though probably it was just a few seconds, but anyway, but
Yeah.
she does, like, she opens her mouth to scream, just like as a, she's like, it talks about how she's like, Wesley told me if this happens, you know, take a quick breath, close your mouth, close your eyes, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And she like is in a panic and she screams, and that it all goes down her throat. She feels like fire down her throat, and that makes her open her eyes, and now it's all in her eyes or whatever.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
when
Mm-hmm.
he pulls her out, which also takes for freaking ever, they're all dead, I don't know how they're not, but when he pulls her out, like she is unconscious for a long time, and like he is trying to like clear her airways, and he even has to like gently try to clean from under her eyelids and stuff, like it talks about she was a long time possibly dead, but she gave up on him when he was supposedly was dead far away. He's not going to give up on her, and so he's going to stay there even if it means that he dies there too.
Yeah.
He's willing to die
That's
there if
that's
she,
love.
in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
This is just Rae, the gospel of Princess Bride according to Rae. But when they get to the end of the fire swamp, and they're like, surrender, and he goes, death first, and then she's like, no, actually not death, let's stay alive even if we have to stay separate. I
Like
kind of
I
wanted,
just want you to be alive. Like knowing you were dead was horrible, but knowing you're
right,
alive somewhere in the world is, there's a
and
chance we can get back together again. But
right, and I kind of wanted him, like I knew that this probably couldn't happen, but even if it was just like his own internal monologue, like I wanted it to be real. In my mind it is that he is thinking, I was willing to die right there if you didn't come back. If it meant that I died in the sand, or if it meant that you never regenerated and I regenerated, you never woke up and
resuscitated.
I just died right there in the
Mm-hmm.
fire swamp, that's how I was going to go, because you weren't here anymore. Life is not worth living without you.
Yeah.
And now you immediately tell me to go live my life without you.
Yeah. Well,
Like
because
I
I
wanted
think,
that to be a thing, and it just never materialized. I was like, ugh.
yeah. Well, like they sort of talk about it how, like, Prince Humperdinck points out, so it was you that did the leaving in the fire swamp.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's relatable because I think there's something like a female like instinct to want to protect the people around you, that you're like, I don't care if I die or like if I have a miserable life, as long
Mm-hmm.
as you're alive, as long as you're okay. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's a part of you that's like, you know what I mean? So I feel like in that moment I felt like that was relatable, and I'm like, because she loved him, she didn't want to be like, well, yeah, die for me. Die
Right.
for me right here. Let's die together. Like
Right.
it just in some ways it made it feel like she cared more about him because she was willing to be miserable the rest of her life and to live with this other guy if it meant that Wesley was alive,
Yeah.
even if it meant they weren't together. So like, yeah, I can get his perspective, but at the same time I get her perspective.
Right. Well, and that was kind of the thing, is that neither of them could see each other's perspective, which you didn't, like, it didn't hinder the story,
Hmm.
but just my own brain, like you said, like I see her perspective and I think I might agree with her perspective, but
Yeah, because it does work out that because they didn't die there, they were able to get back together later.
right.
They will
The
save her later on.
the end the moral of Romeo and Juliet was, never was there a tale of more woe than of Juliet and her Romeo, right? Like
Yeah.
the let's die together is worse, even if you feel like it's going to be actually. So Count Rugen, now I'm doing a deep dive that may not actually
Go right ahead.
be real. Again, this is
I'll
more
follow you. Go
according to
ahead.
Rae. But Count Rugen talks about how he's like, when he brings in the machine, he like hooks it all up, and he like takes forever like twisting it around and whatever. He doesn't do this so much in the movie, but in the book, like he sets it all up, And then he's like, I'm gonna let you chill for the night with this, and you can just think about it, you know, and the anticipation actually makes the pain more. And I kind of feel like that was Wesley. Like, that's how it gets to him more. Do you know what I mean? Because Count Rugen is watching him for this like month or whatever that they have been, however long they've been torturing him. In the movie, I think it's just days maybe that he's
Yeah,
been in
like
there.
it's like maybe a week. Like it's not
Yeah.
very long at all.
And he's completely healed, and they'll torture him, and then they'll give it a few days to heal, and they'll torture him again. And they're doing it in such a rotten way. They know the truth. And they say, if you tell us who hired you to kidnap the princess, we'll give you freedom, which is they'll kill him, but they'll stop torturing him, right? And they're like, ooh, this is so like interesting to see if he knows he's telling the truth and he's not being believed. And is that even more torturous? And then Count Rugen says, when he sets up the machine, he's like, I'm pretty sure I've been watching you, and you're not feeling the pain, the physical pain. You have been able to like teach yourself how to pull out of it, how to kind of escape. It reminded me of Sucker Punch, if you ever saw the movie Sucker Punch. But it reminded me of that, how she like goes into her weird world. But so, you know, kind of one of those kind of things. He's like, but I'm gonna let you try to get some sleep with that next to you and just see how it goes, you know. And the psychological stuff and the concept of like, oh well, you know, he finds out from the princess that the thing that can break Wesley is knowing that a loved one dies, you know, like having these little insights into psyche. I actually find it very interesting, and I hope it was intentional, because as much as I keep going, I don't like what Goldman did here and what Goldman did that, I'm going to assume that that's intentional, and I really like it, that that getting into the psyche is what truly destroyed him, you know. But
And I can see that. That's definitely, that makes sense.
Yeah, and from Princess Buttercup, like the anticipation, I've seen it with my kids. They've got a splinter, and me going like this is so much more.
It's the most painful thing they've ever experienced.
Oh
You're
my
like,
God.
I haven't even touched you yet.
Have you ever tried to give a toddler eye drops? For crying out loud, I thought CPS was going to be called on us. like they think that you are murdering them. Like, it's crazy. And like, there's been times that I'm like, what's the worst that could happen to you? Death, you know? And for Buttercup, she lived through his death. Like, she keeps saying that. She's like, I died that day. You were dead. I have experienced that before. The worst thing that you can imagine is my death. I've lived your death. Like
I've already been there, and I don't want to do it again.
And so where he is all like, Ned first, you know, and she's like, I've been there.
You're like, no, I don't want to do that again. Like,
I know I can live through this because I have, you know.
Yeah, definitely would say movie's better than the book. We obviously read different versions of the book.
I feel crazy. Like, I was like, I'm sure that he
it would make more sense now, like knowing that you read something far longer and more like involved, why you found this so painful to read. I was like, that wasn't that bad.
I would suggest, if people want to read through the book, maybe there's apparently a lot of people that love it. Great. I applaud you. I did not love the book. I liked it better once I skipped past everything that was Goldman's inserts. However, it makes the grandson story make a lot more sense. Why do they keep pulling me out to see this kid sick in bed? It does make more sense when you read it with his inserts, but
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like yours didn't have quite so many,
Yeah.
or they didn't drag on for quite so long, which I think probably improved your experience over mine.
Yeah.
Is
It was a very short listen.
Yeah.
Like it's like 2.5 hours. There was like nothing.
Yeah.
Like
When you
seriously.
when you originally so just a little insight into how we do this, like we'll read the books, we'll watch the movie, whatever, and then we'll just be like, okay, well, I'm ready whenever you are, kind of thing. And so when you, Ruth, were like, hey, anytime, I was like, oh crap. Because when you first initially were like, all right, whenever you want to do Princess Bride, I was like, Wesley is still in the pit of despair. He hasn't even gotten on the machine yet. Like at that point,
I'm
they're
not there.
talking about the machine is ready and whatever. I'm like, there's still so much, because I knew the movie. I'm like, there's still so much more story to tell,
Mm-hmm.
because the movie feels like that's the halfway point.
Yeah.
But in the
Definitely.
book, that was like, well, I
Let
don't
me
have the
check.
bookmark in the right spot anymore. But like, there's just this tiny little bit left of the book,
Oh,
and I was like, I am almost done. Also, I haven't gotten most of the story yet. Like,
yeah.
and so I was a little nervous. I was like, how did she get through it that fast?
Well, now we know why. Now we know how. Now we
But
know.
yeah,
Uh,
I don't hate the book as much as I did the first time through,
mm-hmm.
but it was one of those that I had to have a reason to read it for me.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that concludes our discussion of The Princess Bride. Um, so
Oh, sorry, one quick thing. There is one of those like kids where like the mom showed the movie to the kids. They saw it once, and then she's like, "Oh yeah, let's retell, like have the kids retell it." And we watched that as well. And so you're hearing the kids be like, there was a girl and her name was Buttercup." And then you see that the adult actors like recreating what the kids are
yeah,
saying.
so it's like the kid history thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like kid history. And like at one point, she's like, punch your butt. And so the boy's like, as you wish. And like when the kids laugh, the actors laugh. At one point, she's like, "Oh, Wesley, I love you," because the kid coughed right then, and so the actors just completely recreate whatever. Oh my gosh, it's so funny. Princess Humperdinck, she keeps going, Princess Humperdinck. I mean, Prince Humperdinck, and so he has like a tiara, and like, oh, he has to take off the tiara. That was hilarious. That
Uh,
was all that my kids had seen of the movie for a good long time. I'm like, I kind of want you to watch the real movie. Also, you might not like it as much as you like this.
yeah, that's
Throw
funny.
that out there. If anybody has not seen that yet, look it up. It's
Well,
hilarious.
I'll have to watch it with my kids. I'm pretty sure they'll love it. So,
All right, sorry.
all right. So I had a couple different choices of what to choose for my book, and they're completely different. So I guess I'll leave it to you. Um,
Choose my own
it's
adventure.
either the children's book Where the Wild Things Are or The Stand by Stephen King.
Oh,
So
so I will say I love Where the Wild Things Are. I have never read The Stand.
I read like the uncut super huge edition so that my friend gave it to me in college. So like I'm interested in reading it again and maybe reading the smaller version
Uh-huh.
or, I don't know. But then it'd also be super easy just to do where the wild things are and just read that little kid's book and then watch the movie.
Yeah.
And so it's up to you. And we can always do the stand later on
Yeah.
because
Um, yeah,
there's
let's keep it light and fun. Let's do Where the Wild Things Are.
okay, all right. So next time we will be reading slash watching Where the Wild Things Are.
Sounds great.
All good. Okay. All right. So for Paperback Flicks, I'm Ruth Craddock,
I'm Rae Davidson.
and we'll see you next time.